On April 28th, 2026, a letter arrived at the OPEC Secretariat in Vienna. It was brief, it was formal, and it ended 59 years of membership in one of the most powerful economic arrangements in modern history. The United Arab Emirates was leaving OPEC, not suspending membership, not threatening to leave. Leaving, effective May 1st. 3 days' notice. What happened in the 72 hours that followed tells you more about the future of the petrodollar than anything you will read in a financial newspaper. To understand what the UAE just broke, you need to understand what Saudi Arabia actually built. OPEC is not just an oil cartel, it is Saudi Arabia's most powerful geopolitical instrument. For 50 years, it gave Riyadh something no army could: the ability to move the price of energy for every nation on earth simultaneously. More than that, it gave the dollar a structural guarantee. If oil could only be purchased in US dollars, and if Saudi Arabia controlled how much oil existed, then every government on earth had no choice but to hold dollars, not because they wanted to, because they had no alternative. That arrangement is called the petrodollar system. It ran from 1974 until 2024, 50 years, and its enforcement mechanism was not American military power alone. It was OPEC unity. Saudi Arabia held that unity together through a combination of financial incentives, political pressure, and the implied threat of flooding the market for any member that defected. The cartel's power was not the oil itself, it was the discipline. Remove the discipline, and the mechanism breaks. The UAE just removed the discipline. Here is what most coverage is getting wrong about why the UAE left. The official explanation is production quotas. The UAE built capacity to produce 5 million barrels per day. OPEC capped it at 3.5 million. That left 1.5 million barrels per day sitting in the ground, idle, while Brent crude traded above $100. The Baker Institute estimated this quota was costing Abu Dhabi more than $50 billion in annual revenue. A country does not absorb that loss indefinitely. But the quota dispute is the surface story. The real story started months earlier, in the skies above Abu Dhabi. During the Iran war, the UAE absorbed Iranian missile strikes largely alone. Saudi Arabia provided logistical support. Politically and militarily, the Gulf Cooperation Council's response was, in the words of UAE diplomatic advisor Anwar Gargash, speaking publicly just hours before the OPEC announcement, the weakest historically. The UAE had spent years inside an alliance that constrained its economy and then failed to defend its territory. The OPEC exit was not purely an economic decision, it was a statement. The UAE-Saudi relationship had been fracturing quietly for years before the war made it visible. The two countries compete on aviation, on financial services, on regional influence. Dubai and Riyadh are building parallel visions of what the Middle East's economic future looks like. Saudi Arabia needs high oil prices to fund Vision 2030, its domestic transformation program. The UAE, with a far more diversified economy, does not need prices above $80 to stay solvent. These are structurally different interests inside the same cartel. For a decade, OPEC managed that tension through negotiation, baseline disputes, quota adjustments, side deals. In June 2024, OPEC Plus granted the UAE a modest production increase to 3.5 million barrels per day for 2025. Abu Dhabi accepted. Then came the Iran war, then came the missile strikes, then came the silence from Riyadh. Three things arrived at the same moment: a completed infrastructure capable of 5 million barrels per day, a conflict that made the quotas cost visible in real time, and an alliance partner that chose not to defend you. On May 1st, 2026, the UAE did what no OPEC member of its significance had ever done. It left. What happened next is the part the financial press has underreported. The UAE did not simply leave OPEC. In the same week, it sent a signal to Washington that it was considering pricing some oil transactions in Chinese yuan if dollar liquidity continued to tighten under the Hormuz blockade. This was not a threat delivered in a press release. It was communicated privately through diplomatic channels and then deliberately allowed to surface in financial reporting. Washington moved within days. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent publicly backed an emergency dollar swap line for Abu Dhabi before the US Senate, a $20 billion facility, the kind previously extended only to a handful of the world's most trusted central bank partners. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with UAE Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah on April 26th. Israel deployed its Iron Dome missile defense system to UAE soil, the first time in history that system has ever operated in a foreign country during an active conflict. The US expanded its military footprint at Al Dhafra Air Base in Abu Dhabi. The UAE Foreign Trade Minister described the swap line discussions as an elite matter. It is not about bailing out. This is what dollar diplomacy looks like in 2026. The UAE floated the yuan. Washington responded with military protection, a bilateral currency facility, and a Senate hearing. The petrodollar is not dead, but its maintenance cost has just risen considerably. The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has fallen to 57%, a 25-year low, down from 72% in 2001. Ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz have paid tolls to Iran in Bitcoin. Iran sells an increasing share of its oil to China in yuan. India may now be buying Iranian oil in yuan as well. These are not signs of dollar collapse. They are signs of dollar erosion at the edges, exactly where the petrodollar is most exposed. And now, for the first time, a country inside the Gulf Cooperation Council, a country whose currency is pegged to the dollar, whose sovereign wealth fund holds trillions in US assets, publicly raised the possibility of transacting in yuan. Not as ideology, not as BRICS solidarity, as a practical response to a dollar liquidity problem caused by a war the United States is involved in. Now, for the part most explainers are getting wrong, this does not break the petrodollar system. The Gulf currencies remain dollar-pegged. The GCC sovereign wealth funds hold more than $2 trillion in US assets. There is no viable alternative with the depth and liquidity of US financial markets. The UAE knows this. Washington knows this. What has changed is the negotiating position. For 50 years, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states needed the dollar arrangement more than they needed to question it. The UAE just demonstrated that the dollar arrangement needs them and is willing to pay to keep them. OPEC's power was never simply about oil supply. It was about the dollar's structural guarantee, the mechanism that forced the world to hold US currency to buy energy. That mechanism required one thing above all others: Gulf unity. Saudi Arabia held that unity together for 50 years, through oil embargoes and price crashes, through the 2014 shale war and the 2020 pandemic collapse, through every dispute with Russia inside OPEC+. It held until May 1st, 2026. The UAE's exit does not end dollar dominance, but it ends the era in which dollar dominance in energy markets could be taken for granted. Washington now has to actively defend what it once simply inherited. The question is not whether OPEC survives the UAE's departure. The question is what Saudi Arabia does next, and whether the price of keeping the remaining Gulf states inside the dollar system is one the United States is prepared to keep paying.